Well, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for coming to our second Nature Connections luncheon. Today, we'll be talking about monarchs, Monarch Watch, Monarch Waystation with Sally Coyne. And just as a brief reminder, our Earth Day Festival is coming up a week from Saturday, April 10th, and we hope that we'll see you all out there. Sally, you're up.
All right. Good afternoon, just barely, everybody. I get a chance today to talk about maybe the most recognized and most popular of our backyard residents, monarch butterflies. And what I want to do is talk to you a little bit about monarch biology. Most of you, I bet, know most of this, but perhaps I can fill you in on a few little known details. And then talk about conservation, the need for conservation, what is being done, what can be done, and finally, what can you do along the lines of some citizen science projects that are out there that you can actively involve yourself in helping the monarchs out and getting them back to a population size that is reminiscent of the past. Right now, they've got some problems. So with that, I will get started and try sharing my screen.
Thank you.
Does that come up for everybody?
Yes.
Okay. Here are our favorite, perhaps most beloved backyard residents, monarch butterflies. Probably almost all of you know that they go through 4 stages of development in the course of their 30 or 35-day lifespan. They start out as an egg, they go to caterpillar, they become a chrysalis, and then the butterfly that we all know and enjoy. And understanding all those stages is really important to participating in the recovery of these creatures. Eggs, a little bit about them. What you see here on the left are 4 monarch eggs. Notice they're rather small. That's about the size of a pinhead. Now, what's kind of interesting about this picture is all 4 of those eggs were probably laid by a different female monarch, because the monarch just instinctively knows that it should spread its eggs out. And over its lifetime, it may lay 200 to up to 1,000 eggs. But when you see a group like this, it was probably 4 different monarchs dropping their eggs. They do that so that when these caterpillars hatch and grow very remarkably rapidly, they won't defoliate a single plant. They're spreading the wealth so that the caterpillars a better chance to survive. Here's a close-up of an egg and an egg just hatching with what's called the first stage instar. That is a teeny, tiny baby caterpillar. If that egg is just the size of the head of a pin, imagine how small that caterpillar is. As you probably know, every one of these eggs and every caterpillar of the monarch species is laid on and feeds on milkweed. And this is one of the vulnerabilities of this species. Here are an assortment of the caterpillars. They go through 4 sheds, and so there are 5 different stages or instars of the caterpillar development. You'll see them over here on the upper right, from that tiny one I showed you before to a fully formed one that's just about to become a chrysalis. This is a picture from my garden last year. I had some plants that had so many monarch caterpillars on them that I had to collect caterpillars and transfer them to other big clusters of milkweeds because they were defoliating and running out of food themselves. So this was a transfer effort, a rescue mission. You see, I gathered a little bit of monarch poop there too. Down here in the lower right is just a comparison, because this Black swallowtail caterpillar is probably the easiest one to confuse with a monarch. And you can tell the difference very quickly in two ways. Number one, see those little yellow spots along the back of the caterpillar? That's a sure sign you've got a black swallowtail caterpillar. The other is that the black swallowtail will not be on the milkweeds. Black swallowtails love to eat the carrot family plants, and that includes your carrots, your parsley, your dill, and a lot of others. But if you plant a few more plants than you need, you can all live happily together. Anyways, that's the story basically on the caterpillars, except for the fact that while they're eating your milkweed, they're gathering a toxic substance in the milkweed that's accumulating in their body and making them toxic to predators. And that substance, which is a cardiac glycoside, I believe, carries over into the adult butterfly. Thus, we know it as a toxic creature. A bird only has to try one once, and it knows that this is not an edible, this is not a delicious lunch. And so it provides the animal with protection right through its life. That's why they're focused on the milkweed is essential to them. I think that and I'll talk about migration a little later, but I think they begin to lose some of that toxicity at the end of their overwintering. But that's a subject for either a different time or later. So that's a look at the caterpillars. Now this biggest caterpillar is just about to spin kind of a silken anchor, hook itself onto a leaf, and the skin becomes this beautiful, bright green, apple green chrysalis, decorated with little touches of gold and black. They're lovely structures, and you can find them occasionally under the benches at picnic tables or on the stems of little bushes in your garden. Rarely do, I don't know that I've ever really found one on a milkweed plant, but so they crawl off a little bit, set themselves up, build this beautiful chrysalis, and then they undergo metamorphosis, which probably everybody has heard about and talked about and read about, just the remarkable process of reorganizing their cells inside this case to go from that soft, very distinctive caterpillar to this stage where you can see the butterfly wing through the exterior of the chrysalis. It's hardening, it's about to crack open, and out will emerge a damp butterfly that will dry off and fly off and go about its business. So it's right inside there is this reorganization of cells that is just incredible, amazing, and still not fully understood, still studied constantly. Let's see if this whole stage, the eggs are 3 or 4 days long. The caterpillars live and gain weight and grow for about 14 days. They actually grow about 2,000% in their period of time. And then the chrysalis lasts about 10 days until you have the hatch, the butterfly hatches and takes off and starts the whole cycle over again. So, monarch butterflies. This on the left is a female monarch butterfly. On the right is a male, and you can probably pick out the differences pretty quickly. See the thicker veins here indicate it's a female, the kind of heavier markings. And the male has the finer veins, and it has these 2 blackish dots, which are actually glands. And in all probability, again, this is something still being studied, they give off pheromones, which is a way that butterflies communicate with each other through these pheromones or hormones and through scent and probably some of the taste receptors. Basically for different butterflies to communicate and during mating, when they're getting ready to mate, to communicate who's where and who's what. The other things that you probably have noted about monarchs in your backyard is that they're very kind of slow flyers. They're easy to watch. They're very vulnerable to weather incidents, so they need some sort of shelter. You won't see them flying around at all during a very windy or a cold or a rainy day. They'll seek shelter because they can be damaged or even killed by bad weather events. What else was I going to mention about them? Once they hatch from the chrysalis, they are not, they don't focus on the milkweeds anymore. They don't actually need the milkweed. What they're looking for after that are nectar plants, and any type of nectar plant, from nectar producing trees and perennials and bushes all the way down to annual plants that you'll put in your garden every year. Just everything from zinnias and marigolds to the native wildflowers. And of course, they will nectar on milkweeds if they're available, but there's no obligation there. They simply need the nectar after they've hatched for energy and for nutrients. And as I mentioned before, orange and black, they're toxic, so they're fairly protected from prey, from predators. A quick comment about orange and black butterflies. This is the monarch. This is as we learned just a few minutes ago, this is this is the female without the glands here. The butterfly that is most commonly mistaken for a monarch is a viceroy, which is this butterfly right below the monarch. And this butterfly is really quite a lot rarer than the monarch. I only see maybe 2 or 3 a year here. It's smaller than the monarch. And look at what it has on its hind wings here. See that horizontal line that cuts through? As soon as you see that, you know you don't have a monarch, that this is a viceroy. There are other ways of telling them too. Besides, you get to know, to just be able to see the animal moving and know it's not a monarch, because they're quite fluttery compared to the monarchs. And you see these 4 windows, orange windows out here near the wingtip. That's another field mark. So look carefully, see if you can find a viceroy. I remember when I was in science class, this was taught to me as being a mimic or mimicry. Now they think that the viceroy is also somewhat toxic. So yes, there's mimicry going on, but this animal also has some toxicity apparently. The other 3 here are orange and black, but unless you glimpse them, they should be easy to tell from the monarch. The first one is a fritillary. This is a great spangled fritillary, and we have other types of fritillary in the area. This is a red admiral. And finally, this little lady is painted lady. This is a very common, lovely butterfly we have in the backyard, also a migrant. When she puts her wings up, you can see a pink patch under the wing. This butterfly can be very faded or very bright, so it's often misidentified just because of its changing appearance, depending on how fresh it is or how worn it is. So those are a few confusing butterflies that might confuse you. Range and distribution and migration are really critical to the story of the monarch. A lot of people don't know that monarchs are really found in many places around the world, but they are native to northern South America through these areas. People like them so much, and they like milkweed for a lot of reasons, that they've been exported from North and South America to various places around the world. There's quite a healthy population in southern Spain, and I guess that's kind of northeast Morocco. New Zealand and Australia have a lot of monarch butterflies, and all these islands here in Australasia, all the way, here we've got New Guinea, and we have Borneo and Sumatra, and all those islands have monarch butterflies. They're the same species. The milkweed was taken there, and then the monarch butterflies, and it's tropical, and the monarchs like the area. And this is one of the reasons why it's very difficult to have the monarch declared an endangered species because there are big populations other places around the world and because they are so widely distributed. Those last monarchs that you see in your yard in August and September aren't really focused at all on laying eggs or reproducing. They are focused on getting healthy and strong and heading south. So when the milkweed begin to fade and the days become shorter, they will head out, and those monarchs that your garden has produced late in the year fly all the way from Bucks County down through the Gulf Coast and end up, as a number of you who have visited there, especially Barbeck, know, right in central Mexico. And that's where they overwinter. And they do this because they are not adapted to overwintering in our area. If you force them to stay here in Bucks County over the winter, they would perish. They aren't like some butterflies, whose cocoons or chrysalises can overwinter, or they can go behind bark or whatever. They just cannot tolerate the extreme freezing conditions that we might get. So they take off, they head all the way down here. And they winter it used to be by the mega millions down in very high elevation in central Mexico. Michoacan, I think it's, or the state of Mexico. And way the heck up in these conifer forests, which are very cool. So they migrate down there, and all of that coloring, that slightly orange or pink coloring you see on those trees are butterflies. Here's a closer picture of them just clustering on these conifers, and then a very close picture. So there they are, they're down there. They aren't feeding, they aren't drinking, they're just kind of dormant, and they're surviving the winter. And then they head back north again. So right now, as we speak, these massive clusters are broken up and these monarchs are headed out. Some of them have already gotten up into Texas and the Gulf Coast, where they've laid their first batch of eggs. And the first generation of this year's monarchs are probably already hatched, and already caterpillars eating up milkweed down there. They will not, this first generation is not going to make it back up to Bucks County. They will reproduce along there, and the next generation, some of them may make it. Some of them may stop in Virginia and we make it a third generation, but they work their way back up in the course of the spring and early summer to their extent of the ranges, which goes way the heck up here into Canada, working their way one stage at a time to reproduce, and then the final generation, which is probably the fourth or fifth for 2021, will turn around and go back south. Now, I haven't even mentioned at this point the population out here in California. It is the same species of butterfly. I think it's even the same subspecies. And there's a lot of questions about what the interaction between the two groups is. But this population out in California lives life a little differently, and that many of them winter right down here in the mountains of Southern California. Apparently, a few do come across the Continental Divide into Mexico. This is a population that is in really big trouble. There's a lot that has to be addressed about that, and I'm not going to go there today. But when you hear about monarch butterfly populations plummeting, they're talking about both of them, but the Western one is in particular trouble. Let me get back to my notes and make sure I haven't gone off track here. If anybody has any questions, or Diane, you see any questions, stop me, or I'll just go rambling on here. So, yes, you've probably all heard there's a real population decline in monarchs in general. These are some data for the last 40 years. The Western population is down from literally in the millions to some of the counts last year. People were getting in the 5 digits, 1,000, 3,000, 4,000 animals, or in this case, butterflies. Our eastern population has also decreased dramatically. I mean, those are big numbers for 40 years. And you'll see that there's quite a wild fluctuation in monarch numbers. And this is partly because they're so susceptible to individual events with weather especially. So they can go way up and way down in just a matter of 2 years. But look at the overall trend here. That is not a good curve. Yes, it's come back a little from these terrible years back around 10 years ago. But here we are, and I saw numbers from Mexico for this year, and they aren't good. And I'll talk in a minute about some of the reasons for that. The basic threats are, some of them are really obvious, and every one of you have heard these things. Pesticides are obviously bad for eggs, bad for caterpillars, bad for the butterflies, and bad for basically everything else. I mean, even people who apply pesticides are putting a killing agent in their yard, and even if you're very, very careful, the next creature that comes along or something that's hidden under a leaf is also going to be killed by the pesticide. So pesticides are a problem, whether they're applied in your garden, on your lawn, or agriculturally. Herbicides are a much bigger problem than people thought. And this is because it's because people don't understand how critical wildflowers, native flowers, and in the case of the monarch, milkweed is to those creatures. Once we genetically modified various crops, corn and soybeans and so on, which was great for the farmers, and you can produce more of that product than you could previously, the farmers ended up applying more herbicide. The way that works is once you genetically modify the soybean so that it resists the herbicide, you don't have to plow anymore. You don't have to till it. You don't have to prevent weeds in other ways. You can just apply the herbicide. Kills all the weeds, none of the plants, none of the agricultural plants. So all the little patches of milkweed or wildflowers that existed in the rows of the soybean or the corn, and all of the ones out around the edges in the hedgerow are now killed by the herbicide. So in a way, this is a habitat degradation that makes it impossible for the monarchs to survive. So whether the herbicides are used in your backyard, which is unlikely if you're a gardener, or more importantly in agricultural fields, this is a real problem for monarchs. As I said, that's a form of habitat destruction. There's a lot of others too, like putting a parking garage or over a lot that had some milkweeds in it, or a housing division, or making a lot more lawn or golf courses, or going to, in Mexico, big logging outfits going in and taking out some of those coniferous forests, or people who really need wood to heat their home, cutting trees that are in national forests for very understandable reasons. There's a lot of ways that this kind of habitat destruction has to be addressed. And finally, climate change itself. I already mentioned that monarchs are really susceptible to weather. So the more violent weather shifts we have, the more challenges they're going to face. The other thing that's happening that's not really understood yet, and here it applies to the monarchs, but it probably applies a lot more broadly. Plants are changing their composition. With longer summers, warmer weather, things like tropical milkweed seem to be concentrating the toxins, the glycosides that give the toxicity to the monarchs. If they concentrate those toxins too much, they're going to poison the monarchs as well. There's only a certain level that the monarchs can tolerate. So these are, little sidelines from climate change that we don't talk about often, but may have a major impact on our food chain, our biodiversity, on the cycles of life here. So those are the main challenges to the monarch, and that are resulting in the decline in the populations. Last year and over the last few years, the monarch's been assessed for endangered species status, but as of last December, it was precluded. Fish and Wildlife says, yes, it deserves that status, but we can't give it to them right now. Our resources are so limited. There's like 160 species ahead of the monarch on the list. We will look at it again regularly, but the species is very widespread. So one event isn't going to wipe it out completely. And there are these other populations around the world. So keep your eyes on this. Fish and Wildlife will come back and look at it again. It'll be reevaluated, but this is the status right now. So addressing this, one of the big ways, and this is one of the reasons why Fish and Wildlife thought that people are addressing this situation with monarchs and other similar species right now, are these big rights-of-way projects along highways, along especially federal, but also state highways, and under utility lines. Efforts to create habitat that's connected in big, broad swaths around states and parts of the country. I've actually been in touch with people here. I live right in New Jersey, across the river. And the New Jersey folks are very proud of how many milkweed seeds they're distributing in under their big power lines. You've probably seen efforts, Lady Bird Johnson efforts with wildflowers along the roads. But these rights-of-way connect habitat projects will have a huge impact if they work and if people keep after them. So be aware of that when there's opportunities in your backyard. Insist on seeding with native wildflowers, lots of milkweed, but this isn't just to address monarchs either. All the pollinators and a lot of grassland birds benefit from these projects. And you can do things that help out a lot right in your own backyard. This wonderful little poster, I do not know who to attribute it to, but I had to use it because I just found it online and I loved it. It's a little hard to read, so I'll read it to you. Milkweed and how to grow it. Milkweed is becoming less and less common. So the monarch butterfly is becoming endangered because milkweed is the only plant monarch caterpillars eat. Exclamation point. That is why we need to grow it. To grow milkweed, you need to use cold stratification and then plant the seeds. If it grows, the monarchs will come. And that's true. That's a challenge to do, but it works sometimes. So put in butterfly gardens, eliminate threats in your backyard, eliminate dangers, and yes, they will come. You'll find that you have lots of life and thriving in the garden. And once you have them coming, you can contribute what you observe to a variety of community or citizen science projects all over the country. And I want to talk about two of them in particular right now. First of all, there's lots of things out there, lots of ways you can participate. This list will be available with the presentation at our website. As I was looking around online when I was putting this together, I couldn't believe how many projects and background information there was out there. People do love monarch butterflies. This Journey North, which has been around for a long time, has projects that involve hummingbirds, tulips, leaf, bud out, dates and so on. Lots of things to monitor climate and impact. But what I'm going to focus on today is Monarch Watch. Monarch Watch is a massive group of projects and information that's available online. most of which is totally free of charge. I'm going to talk about their calendar event and this Waystation of program today, but look at all the other things that are available there. And just a quick Google and you'll be on the site. One of the really interesting projects that they work on are tagging monarch butterflies. And keep your eyes open because you may find a butterfly in your yard that has one of these tags. And if you can write the number down, you can find out where it was tagged and do some research online for yourself. We at Honey Hollow aren't going to be doing any tagging, but it is being done by our colleagues down at Cape May every fall. And if you watch online or give them a call or send them an email, you'll see when they're doing it. And it's a great outing to go down there and watch them capture some of the thousands of the butterflies that collect at Cape May because they're kind of funneled there as they start moving south. They will give you an explanation of what they're doing. They'll talk to you more about the butterflies. They'll tag them. They'll let you release them. It's a great day in the outdoors. Monarch Watch also, and they have a lot of videos on this tagging and so on, but they also have their own shows and videos on Zoom. You can look at the website and see when they're taking place. They have an online shop for those of you who are real monarch fanatics and want to have a monarch in parts of your wardrobe and posters on the wall and signs. Talk about them in a minute. But the two quick projects I want to briefly mention here today. The first is the calendar project. This is a very simple citizen science project. It starts tomorrow and runs until June 20th, and then a second session from July 15th to August 20th. This first period, we're going to see very few monarchs around this area. That's exactly what they're interested in. When do they arrive? How many come back? When do you first see the monarchs and what kind of density increases there are over the month that follows? The second period, they're looking for the numbers during the peak egg laying period of time, which is that month, late July and through August. From that, they can extrapolate, they can predict what kind of migration, what kind of a population increase or decrease we've had through the year. And finally, they're interested in knowing overall what weather events seem to have some impact on the monarch. Are there bad storms in your area during this period? Was there a lot of wind? Was it extremely cold? You'll know right now that on a really windy day, you are not going to see any butterflies flying around your garden. They just can't be in the wind and they can't forage. So that'll be a tough time for them. So in order to participate, you go to the website, go to the Monarch Watch website and go to /calendar. They'll give you can register. They'll give you an option to figure out what your GPS coordinates are just by putting in your dot on a map or your address. Then you record your observations for that period of time. You only have to do there's only 4 possibilities. You go out and you see some monarch butterflies and you make your best judgment about how many butterflies you saw. If you see 3 together and then maybe a raggedy one later in the day, you write down 4. If you just see 1 through the whole day, you just write down 1. If you looked around and you see none, you write a 0. If you had to go to work or you're on vacation and you didn't look at all, you leave it blank. And if it's a miserable, cold, windy, whatever day, when you know the butterflies weren't out, you write a W. They provide you online with a spreadsheet, but it's probably easier just to use a calendar and do something like this. And you see, I've created an account for the first 2 weeks of April. Here are 5 days in a row where the weather's not good. And then somebody here started to see a few monarchs and then they went away. But look at the difference and remember, no data, like a 0 here, is important data. No data does not mean I didn't watch. It means I looked and there wasn't a butterfly there. I didn't see any. So make sure you don't just leave it blank when you're out there and looking. So it's either weathered out. I did see a monarch, and here's my best guess at how many were in the yard. I looked for monarchs and there weren't any. Or I was away, I couldn't do it. I was out of the area, I wasn't in my yard. So those are the possibilities. Then at the end of that first session, and finally at the end of the second session, they will send you an online form to fill out and submit. That's it, that's the whole project. In your backyard, it'll just take you a little bit of time at the end of each day that it's convenient. The second way to get involved is with Monarch Waystations. Now, if you have a butterfly garden, you probably already have a waystation. If you're starting from scratch in a new house, I'll give you a few guidelines. Your goal is to do two things. Provide milkweed so that the monarchs can reproduce, and to provide a nectar source so that the butterflies have some energy and some nutrition so they can lay eggs and reproduce, and later in the year so they have enough strength to head south. There's no minimum or maximum size. I've heard of people that have done this on balconies in apartment buildings, but ideally Monarch Watch says if you can start with 100 square feet, that would be ideal. You can break it up over several smaller gardens, and of course a bigger garden is great. Nectar producing plants need a lot of sun. So the more sun you can give them, the better, but 6 hours is kind of the minimum. Put your plants clustered together, not so tight that they interfere with each other, but they provide some sort of structure for protection, both from predators and from the wind and from rain and so on. So cluster your plants, put multiple plants in. You may want to consider putting in some other features, like some sort of driftwood or stones or something like that that can also act as shelter. You need milkweed plants. Put in at least 10 and try to put in 2 different species, and I'll talk about them in a minute. You want enough so that if a monarch comes and lays some eggs, there'll be plenty of food for the caterpillars. Then you want some nectar plants, and the fact that they bloom sequentially is very important because ideally you'd like to have some flowers there for nectar sources from May right through September. They can be annuals, biennials, or perennials. When you get into the biennial and perennial, you really should try to plant some native species rather than some of the non-natives. I think it's less important with the annuals. And think ahead when you plan your garden about sustainability. If it's going to need mulching, most of these plants don't need fertilizer, but you might want to think about compost and fertilizer. What are you going to do with it in the winter? Some people don't like to have standing dead plants in their yard in the winter, but you should leave them up for other insects through the winter. So if you don't like the looks of that, put it on the side of your garden. Oops. Plant choice, watering, non-plant features, all things to be thought about. See, this butterfly here has a marker dot on it. These are the native northeastern milkweeds. Pokeweed is probably the least known. You see these saber-like leaves. Then we have the swamp or rose milkweed, which is a beautiful milkweed. I love this one. It also comes in white. The butterfly weed, I find it around here in the wild too. And they're slow to expand in the garden, but they grow quite well here. And boy, do the butterflies, caterpillars love them. And then this is the big common milkweed that's tough and hardy out in the fields. So all of these are great sources for the great food for the monarch caterpillar. And there's so many of these lists out online. I just put down a quickie for good nectar plants. If you look at the Xerxes the Southeastern Pennsylvania Butterfly Association, New Jersey, they all have all sorts of plants that are great nectar producers. I'm really moving here. Let's see. So you install your garden, you put a garden in, get it going, and you register it. And then you do you can do your various butterfly counts there. And in order to support and educate and inspire people, you may want to go to the Monarch Watch shop, as Bucks Audubon is doing, and buy a sign to mark your garden and tell other people what you're doing and inspire other people to do the same sort of thing and get the conversation going about how, yes, it's not just polar bears that are in danger. I mean, there are insects that have got big problems too, including these beloved butterflies. So that's about it as far as my presentation. In a minute here, I'll take any questions anybody has. I do want to remind everybody that July is going to be Butterfly Month at Bucks County Audubon. And everything butterfly. There is going to be presentations. I know Barbara Beck is going to talk about this trip to Mexico, and there's going to be a fantastic movie about monarch butterflies, and the North American butterfly count is taking place then, and it'll just be butterflies galore. And maybe we can all have a workshop and make these outfits up as our Halloween costumes for next fall. And I don't know where that picture came from either, but is it wonderful or what? It's a jewelry idea for sure. So thank you very much. Is there anybody has any questions or anything I can fill you in about in addition to what I've already gone on about?
We're a small enough group, so if you want to just unmute yourself and ask the questions that you may have, that'd be great.
Sally, I want to ask you about the monarchs that are in Australia and New Zealand. How are those populations affecting the native butterflies there? Do you know?
I don't know. And I've seen them there, and I've never even thought to ask that. Have you ever heard, has anybody ever heard of butterflies impacting? You know, I would bet they aren't having an impact, because I don't know of any other butterflies that feed on milkweed, and they brought people that brought them there brought the milkweed with them. So I don't think butterflies impact each other because of nectar. It would be the caterpillar food that would have an impact. So I would bet no, but I've never asked that question.
Do they migrate as well there?
No, I don't think so.
That's really interesting. I had never heard that. It was so cool.
It's, you know, the reason, as I said, they migrate here is because they can't stand the extreme cold. So most of those areas that they're in Southeast Asia and southern Spain are semi-tropical or tropical. So there wouldn't be any reason to migrate. And the fact that the migration is so limited in California means, I think, that these different populations have they aren't stuck in long distance migrant pattern. Instinctively, they have some power over how far they go and distribution.
And probably what's impacting the Western monarchs here in the North America is those fires too. We've had some really bad fire situations in California.
True.
That's probably really impacting them as well. I know it's affected bird populations and migrations as well.
Did a lot of die off from starvation,
Mm-hmm.
as much as the direct cause. These indirect causes are really tough on wildlife. They're the byproduct, you know. They aren't the direct kill that we're taught to be so reactive to. You don't see the impact until months down the road. Any other questions? I guess this will be available, Diane, on Facebook or YouTube or whatever.
It'll be available on both. Our YouTube channel is probably the best place to get it, but it should be up on Facebook as well.
Oh, great.
Thank you, Sally. It was a great presentation.
Thank you.
That was terrific. Thank you so much.
You're welcome, and talk to you all soon.
Bye, bye, guys. Thank you.
Bye, everybody. Bye,
Bye.
Juanita.